This is Retail Voices, the podcast where leaders from the world of retail and outside of retail talk straight about what really works. Insight, innovation, and the human side of the industry all in one place. Hosted by Mark Lack. That's me. Let's dive in. Okay, hi Ash, and welcome to Retail Voices.
Hi, Mark. Pleasure being here.
Great to have you here. In this episode, we're going to be talking about human capital within retail. In fact, some of the things that you have implemented in several different businesses recently. Two of those times were actually with me. So can you quickly introduce yourself so that everyone knows who you are and what you've been up to recently?
Certainly. So, by profession, I happen to be a human resources professional who has worked in roughly 17 countries in Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Europe. Last almost 10-15 years have gone majorly into retail sector with large scale transformation in family offices and retail segment in FMCG trading sectors as well. And out of which, like you said rightly, two of the times we worked together and we drove some very large scale transformations. Other than that, I'm a passionate coach. I do coaching and mentoring of a lot of young leaders who are passionate about growing because of their ambitions and aspirations to be global leaders. And I do that pro bono most of the times. But I also have a firm called SuccessionIQ, which I have recently established. And one of the main reason, and I've spoken to you about this quite some time back, is that I've always felt after my last almost 2 decades of working very closely with the boards that in most cases, most of the boards and CXO teams do not know how to differentiate between performance and potential. And that leads to one of the biggest biases, which affects all the succession decisions worldwide. And that is called the crown prince bias, wherein we have an image of what we want, and that image is largely far from reality. And then you end up bringing someone who looks like the part, but the person comes in and then disaster follows. And then you end up firing the guy. So it has happened so many times in front of me that I realized that succession planning is a very strong, incompetent area in human resources. So I went very aggressively in that direction to learn more about it. And I've over the years built a lot of expertise in that area. So that's another passionate area of interest of late.
That's fantastic. That sounds really good. So I do have several questions for you, and hopefully we have time to get them all answered, so that our listeners can get a real picture of what human capital means in today's retail environment, and about what you do and what you potentially can do for people. So let's go for the first question. Can you discuss some of the recent changes you have seen in the retail industry and how your role as a CHRO has played a part in managing these changes?
Sure. So specifically, when I look in this market, which is largely the Middle East environment, I'm realizing that there's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence, and a lot of focus is going in major directions of AI-based transformations. Uh, Personally, if you ask me, I'm not in complete agreement with that direction because I feel that, and Middle East has this peculiar problem that sometimes it starts to copy and paste what it sees as a best practice in rest of the world. And that has often happened before also in front of me. So it is no wonder that most of the CHROs are being asked nowadays by the retail boards, that bring AI solutions and cut the workforce by half or cut the workforce by a quarter. And I think it's a disastrous way of thinking because we don't realize retail has historically and even today, I believe, always been about people. And I believe that organizations like Walmart always got it right for a reason. Even when businesses were not doing well for them, they kept investing in people. And what is unique about Walmart is it has always kept its development pipeline and the development agenda separate from the revenue agenda. So what it means is even when a crisis follows, they still have workforce getting developed to deal with the crisis. Versus the way most of the retailers in this market operate, that when the revenue starts to getting depleted, the first cost that they cut is the training cost, development cost, or headcount cost. which I think is a very bad way to perform and manage, because at the end of the day, this leads to disengagement and it's a
Yep.
downward spiral. They don't realize that they disengage their workforce so much that even when the market recovers, their performance may improve because the market has recovered, but they will not achieve the peak potential that they could have achieved had they kept investing in people during crisis. So that's a common mistake, and I'm surprised to see almost all the retailers in this market keep on making that mistake. And obviously, you and I are a few people who often, when questioned on this agenda, we often pushed it back, and we never let people get cut because of a recession or a downturn, because we were very clear that there will come a time when this investment in people and development will pay back, and it always paid back. And so I have proof, and I'm sure you have in your journey proof that it's a wrong decision to make. But of late, this is a pattern that I'm seeing emerging, and people are using AI to make those decisions. And unfortunately for me, to conclude, AI is all about process improvement, efficiency maximizing, potential scope of improvement, and developing a certain process to a level of world class expertise. But what are we using it for? We are using it to reduce cost, which is a very minimal use of artificial intelligence in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it is a crazy use that people are actually using AI to reduce staff costs, whereas AI is supposed to be a tool that assists you with efficiency and process, as you're saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I mean, I like technology and I have no problem with technology at all. But I still think that we should be working on HI a lot more than AI, or as much as. Let's at least make it an equivalent. And as you say, keep investing in the people to be able to use the AI rather than just replace them with AI. And
Hmm.
that's interesting because it really leads on to the second question. And it's
In fact,
about,
if you allow me, Mark, I want to
yeah,
add something very interesting. Very recently, I was in a debate with a few HR folks, and they were continuously talking about it. And I asked all of them a question. I said, "Do you guys travel?" They said, "Yes, we all travel." I said, "Let me ask you a question. Would you want to travel in a plane which is being run by an AI and ML program versus a plane which is being run by a pilot?" Every one of them was silent. Like, we can feel that there's no right answer to this question, but the actual right answer is, I will always end up trusting a human for a
yes,
human based decision making versus a machine for a human based decision making.
yes.
Even though I am very fond of AI, I've used tech very advanced level in my career, but I also believe there is an over obsession of AI, of late. Yeah,
There is, yeah. Everybody seems to think it's the next great thing, and
absolutely.
everybody thinks they're going to be left behind unless they invest.
Yeah,
So millions and billions and potentially even trillions is being poured in by all of these
yeah,
companies,
yeah,
thinking it's going to be the savior of their businesses, and
yeah,
it's not always the case. So,
absolutely.
like I say, that sort of runs into the next question I have about change management within an organization, and particularly in the context of our industry, as things like AI is coming in. What do we do about it? How do we manage it? And then how do we manage that change to make sure the people are brought along with it?
This is a very fond question of mine, and I've had several sessions, discussions with several leaders worldwide over this. I've hired leaders for driving transformation and change, and you have driven transformation and change for so many decades in your career worldwide. And I often come across one very important point of view. If you look at why retail as an industry flourished, and in certain parts it kept flourishing, in certain parts it went up and down. I think largely the fundamentals of retail have always remained the same. If you give me a choice personally to buy a product online versus to go and experience it in, let's say, a Mall of Emirates or a Dubai Mall environment, if given a choice, I will always go to the mall. I will always go to Dubai Mall. And I think most people think like that. And there is this unfortunate join the bandwagon kind of a stream of AI, wherein people's mindsets are being manipulated to move to e-commerce and m-commerce and use AI platforms, and in a way create threat for retail industry. But in reality, I think human beings crave for human interactions,
Hmm.
and that's a reality of life, whether we like it or not. And that's one of the reasons, one of the biggest minds of Google team, which was a part of the entire AI strategy for Google, later on left Google, and it said that I believe the direction that Google is taking is going to be dangerous for the world in coming years. Because the reason for AI has to be to improve experience. It cannot be to replace human beings. It cannot be to minimize human interactions. It
Mm.
cannot be to minimize human interventions. Unfortunately, that's what AI and e-commerce and m-commerce is ending up doing. To me, if you create a retail environment like Walmart keeps getting successful at it all the time. And one of the things I love what I read about it, and I remember Sam said something beautiful ages back, and he said retail is all about excitement, you know.
Mm.
And if you build that excitement in your people, your customers will be excited to come back to your stores all the time. The problem is we are often looking for solutions to solve operational problems without paying attention to the excitement in solving a problem. It's like very simple. If you get an amateur mountaineer and tell him, can you climb Mount Everest? He wouldn't get excited. But you
Yeah.
show him a motivational video, train him for it, and then get him to do it, he may actually surprise you. And Mark, you'll be surprised. The maximum number of deaths on top of Mount Everest are of experienced mountaineers. Amateur
Yeah.
mountaineers are more successful in climbing Mount Everest because there is no baggage.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
And
Exactly.
unfortunately, what is right now happening in retail, a lot of brain drain is happening and overloading of things to move people away from the fundamentals of retail. Retail is about human interactions. Retail is about enjoying the buying experience, enjoying the consumer experience, living through it, looking at the lights, the product, the setting, everything is doing magic to my senses. And
Exactly.
slowly and steadily, AI and MCOM and e-com is taking that away.
Well, I think
And,
it's I think it's basically accelerated because I
yes,
talk about it in my very first podcast where the art of retail has been disappearing over the last 40 to 50 years because we've all
absolutely.
looked for efficiencies and we've made it very, very bland and boring
Yes,
and beige to
yes,
go into the store. It's
yes,
just,
yes.
20 meters of
Yeah,
beige shelves with the same
yeah,
product, same pricing,
yeah,
boring, boring, boring.
yeah.
But we're buying food, and food is exciting stuff. You could do so much with
Absolutely,
it, so
absolutely.
many things that you can do with food. It's amazing. And we have the fresh departments that you can actually make a theatre out of for the
Yeah,
customers
yeah.
and make it feel exciting to go to the store again and buy food. And food is amazing.
Absolutely, absolutely. I remember when we had started some new food lines in the Ibn Battuta Mall
Mm.
in the years when we were together at BMA and when BMA had owned the franchisee for Gion. And it was a sellout every day. And because we were trying so many different cuisines, and food is a very good pull for retail, and there were lines of people coming in, and we were selling it cheap, economical, at the same time, very tasty and fresh ingredients bought every day and replenished every day. And it's all about the excitement. That's what the stuff that you're talking about. And you said it rightly. They're making it so bland. And
Yeah.
that's the reason people are shifting to other, modes of retail because they're losing interest. People are not
Yes.
realizing it.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, this leads us very nicely on to the next question,
Yeah.
in terms of technological advancements, disruption, and of course the consumer. We say consumer preference
Hmm.
in terms of e-commerce, but
Hmm.
actually I think we've done it to ourselves because we thought it was the way to go. A customer needs an onion, we need to deliver it in 15 minutes.
Hmm.
Well, if I'm trying to deliver an onion in 15 minutes, I'm not making any money
Hmm.
unless the onion's going to start costing $5
Absolutely.
an onion, which consumers aren't
Absolutely.
prepared to pay. So it
Yeah.
seems to me that we're sort of going down to the bottom of the barrel and scraping it,
Yes.
and then saying, okay, who's got the deepest pockets? Because
Hmm.
nobody's really making any money from e-commerce. And a lot of these companies that start up, and I could name quite a lot of them, they start
Hmm.
up, they've either got the e-commerce bit, they've got the dark
Hmm.
store bit, they've got the
Hmm.
delivery bit, somebody's got a bit
Hmm.
of all of these. And how
Hmm.
many of them have already failed with
Hmm.
all the money that goes into them as first round funding, seed funding, angel investors, all this money comes in.
Yeah.
And basically, all of them are looking for the IPO,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the one that has the deepest pockets ends up surviving.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do we manage our people, especially the guys that are
Mm,
still filling the shelves and now
mm,
maybe picking the shelves as well?
mm,
How do we manage them? How do we keep them engaged?
mm. This is something which is perhaps a very critical question to ask. And I think most CEOs and leaders who are really genuinely inclined to improve their culture and improve their performance will be struggling with this today. And I want to kind of bring in a different context here. One of the things I've always believed that the industry is impacted right now majorly by these very large VC shark tanks and entrepreneurs who are investors in big companies. And they are building the mindset to suit their narrative, which is not the reality. It's very far from reality. And one of the core examples is you remember the LP days when we used to hold the music disc in our hand. There
Yeah,
was something magical about bringing it to a music player, putting it there. And then, because there was a physical interaction, and the fact is, neurologically, an employee or a human mind is programmed to enjoy and experience more when there is a physical interaction with the device or the operating mechanism in between. You know what we have done? We have literally stolen the whole process away from the human, and that's the problem. And unfortunately, all the investment firms of the world are ganging up to actually make it worse, and no one is talking about it, no one is questioning it. Everyone is in for it, including the rulers of the various countries, or the presidents of various governments. Everyone is talking about AI and the new age, new wave technology, without realizing that the real experience of joy, fun, having engagement with the brand that you were dealing with, or the company you were dealing with, was with the process that you were connected with in a human way, whether it's a product, or whether it was a manager walking up to an employee and saying what a great job, versus today going to social media and liking what he's doing, which might be liked by 100 people. I would any day love my manager to walk up to me and keep his hand on my shoulder and say, I'm proud of what you did, Ash, great job, versus just in a remote way thanking me on a social media platform while not meaning it.
yes,
What people don't
yeah.
realize, this is the reason that employees are not engaged anymore. Loyalty is missing. People keep leaving organizations, and people keep asking this question, why are employees not loyal anymore? They are not loyal anymore because you have changed the rules of the game. You're
I
playing
think
it the way it should not be played with, you know?
I think the problem is, and I noticed this maybe 10 to 15 years ago, it started. And it started with the software companies. You and
Yes.
I, and especially me, I come from an
Mm,
age where I used
mm,
to buy a CD
mm,
and put it into my laptop and upload Windows and
mm.
Microsoft Office. And I
Yeah,
paid my
yeah,
80 odd pounds, whatever it was back then,
yeah,
and I owned the disc forever.
yeah.
Now it's all SaaS related, software as
Yes,
a service.
yes, yes.
If we look at our music,
Mm,
we all click away at
mm,
Apple, iTunes, and all this kind of stuff.
mm.
But what happens when we go? Because we don't technically
Absolutely.
own that music. It's within
Absolutely.
our Apple
Absolutely.
ecosystem. We don't own it.
Absolutely.
If you look at things like the cost of living crisis that is
Yes.
happening now, and what's happening with corporations buying up large tracts of land and housing, people don't own their house anymore.
Yes.
They rent.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the world is going in such a direction that we don't
Absolutely.
own anything anymore.
Absolutely. And
And what we want gets
yeah,
delivered to us.
yeah, yeah. And I want to add something to that, Mark. You picked a very beautiful part of a context which bothers me a lot. You and we used to call it in our learning days. We used to call it the hand and mind wiring. The hand and mind wiring, which had heart in between. Whatever one does with these three together will always stay with you forever. And the unfortunate part, if you really look at technology, whatever is coming out is getting obsolete in 6 months.
Yes.
So the companies that are building technology are themselves cannibalizing their own products and services within 6 months by bringing a newer version. And there is no end to it. There will be no end to it. The other part of the problem is there was a time when there were experts in the market of every sector, every segment. Now look at our sector also. You know what is happening with the advent of digitization, tech, and AI? What is happening? There were days when we would, and I'm a software engineer by qualification, as you know, I've coded by my hand. And I know today a software engineer doesn't need to code. which was the basic core essential skill a programmer must know. He just needs to go to cloud, cut, copy, paste, and 10 minutes, voila, you have the best scripted code that needs to be there. The whole technical awareness, the maturity of technical bandwidth is missing. And the more and more tech driven we will be, and the more and more digital we will be, the moment, imagine a country whose entire electrical power supply is driven by digital. One code has to go wrong,
Yes.
and that country might not have electricity for an year if there is no one who knows how the source code was built.
Yes.
We are
Yeah.
running towards a disaster. The way, the amount of blind obsession with AI, and the amount of blind maniac passionate obsession with AI, there is no one asking these questions. That
No.
you are continuously migrating to a better version, version 2, version 3. What's going to happen once the version 10 collapses?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have a sort of side project as well, aside from Retail 101 and Retail Voices, called Parallel, and it's the parallel effect. And I just recently uploaded an episode on YouTube about that, and it was specifically about solar storm. A solar storm hits Earth. What
Yes.
happens next? And a lot of the protections are not in place for all of this digital stuff that we're doing and electronics, and it's not hidden, it's not buried underground, it's all in the air. So as soon as this solar storm hits, and if we hit something like the Carrington event, then we're going to be in trouble with the amount of
Yes.
stuff we've got under digital processes nowadays. How do we deal with that? The good thing is that we still have some elements of retail, and I know that some retailers have tried it where they're moving some of the skill-based stuff into central hubs, so such as butchery, bakery. It's all going
Which
to
is good.
central
Which
hubs.
is good. Yeah.
But then what happens is the skill base actually reduces, because instead of having 3 or 4 butchers in each store, I might have 5 butchers in one place that do all the work, and so therefore the skill base itself gets lost. And what
Yeah.
I'd rather have, and I've tried to do this everywhere that I've been, is okay, we can have a central butchery for some of the basic processes, how to cut up a chicken, get a chicken cut up, how to cut an 8-inch steak at a standard level, that's fine for some packaged. But then you should still have a butchery service counter where, what if you want a 6-ounce steak or a 9-ounce steak, or what if you want a joint that's 1.2 kilos? Then that butcher can actually use his real skills to make a proper joint for a customer, rather than standing there boring all day making some mince or making some 8-inch steaks all day, or trying to cut up a chicken into portions perfectly every single time. That's not what we want. What we want is for them to use their real skills. The same as the deli counter. All the deli counters are disappearing. Thank goodness they're still left in the Middle East. But it's rare to go to a deli counter in the West now, where you can actually talk to the person behind the counter and say, okay, I need a soft cheese. It needs to be from this country. It needs to be this, and that person has the knowledge, has the understanding of what you're looking for, and saw you last week and said, yeah, I remember you were here last week and I gave you that cheese. How was it? And that's the sort of interaction that we're starting to lose.
Yeah, and that's totally missing today. I'm often talking to my 2 teenage daughters, and one of the things I realize in this age group, and many of them are going to be the future employee pool, this generation of the retail market. Uh, you know, Retail was always about learning from the process by doing it with hands.
Yes.
The problem with the advent of e-learning and LMS, for me at least, it has taken away the fascination of learning, because you're not learning, you're just, it's like the difference between hearing and listening. You know,
Yes.
when I see a video on YouTube, it may stay with me for 10 minutes, maybe an hour, or a week at best, if it has really moved me. But when I do something with my own hands, and again, the hand, the wire, and the mind, the wiring between hand, mind, and the heart, and everything, it comes together, that stays with me for life.
Yes.
And retail was brilliant example of this. And
and
I
you can
think
make
your career,
mistakes.
your career is a brilliant example of that. You've done stockist role. I've done timekeeping. I've done timekeeping when I started my career. Today, you tell an HR postgraduate to go and do timekeeping, he will end up coming with his resignation and say, go to hell. I'm not going to do that. You tell them to do payrolling, they will think it's an insult. And
Yes.
I've done that. When you learn by the building blocks of anything, whether it's business, whether it's culture, whether it's a market, whether it's a organization, you become an expert in that area. And that's why I made that statement. There are no longer any experts, and it's gonna get more and more dangerously worse. We will lose experts in the market. There will be very scarce level of pool of talent,
It
and
will be
that's my
empty.
biggest worry. That's my
It will
biggest
be
worry.
empty because where
Yeah.
do my butchers come from? And like you say, by actually physically doing it rather than just watch. I mean, video has its place. We've all
Yeah,
done
yeah,
these
yeah,
sort of
yeah, yeah.
micro training
Obviously,
sessions,
obviously.
but a butcher needs to cut a piece of meat and
Yes,
make a mistake.
yes,
If you don't make a mistake, you're not learning.
yes.
You're just doing something by rote.
Yes,
Which we
yes.
know that when schools and education went the way for a while in the 70s of just
Yeah,
learning by rote,
yeah,
it didn't expand the mind.
yeah.
It just okay. I know to say 1 times 2 is 2, but I don't know
Mm,
why 1 times 2 is 2.
mm, mm,
And that's
mm,
also the problem with things like the out of
mm,
stock and availability measurements. We
mm,
allow the systems themselves to actually work away and do it in the background as the AI that they're now calling it. Basically, it was
mm,
just an algorithm previously.
mm, mm,
But what happened is we forgot to
mm,
tell the store managers and the department heads how the actual algorithm works, how the
mm.
algorithm is put together, and which
Yeah,
piece means what, so that
yeah,
they can understand it. They just blindly say, okay, the
yeah,
machine says order two, so I order two.
yeah,
That's it.
yeah,
They don't think about it anymore.
yeah, yeah.
And
And
that's a big
that's the
loss.
dangerous part. That's the dangerous part. And especially in retail, this is gonna impact us very badly,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so that's a very serious issue.
So let's move on to a bit of a segue. So
Mm.
we between us have implemented quite a few successful employee programs. We
Yes,
keep talking about
yes,
employees, so
yes.
let's sort of go on to what we've actually done for
Sure,
some of our employees.
sure,
If you could share some of those initiatives in terms of how
sure.
we keep people engaged or how you've kept people engaged in the past.
Sure. So, generally an organization and the way you look at any organization, largely, at least till the last few years, it was always like a pyramid. There will be some people at the top having a vision and an organizational focus agenda, and then driving the mission and purpose of the organization forward with people around it. What had happened over the years, many organizations worldwide became too big, and the couple of times that we worked together, we worked in similar environment. So one of the things, I remember you were a partner to that initiative. In one agenda I'm very close to my heart. We called it lighting the fire within.
Yeah,
And the whole purpose of that agenda was that we wanted to make people feel that they, even with whatever role they are doing in the organization, are playing a role in getting the vision accomplished. What happens often, when you tell an employee how he or she performs, you correct the agenda of performance, but the heart doesn't get attached to it. But at the same time, when you tell the reason of why that performance is required and how he, by and getting engaged with that process, can make a superior delivery and a much more effective performance agenda, then the employee gets attached to the agenda and the heart takes the buying. And I always tell people the heart always will supersede the mind. The mind will always follow the heart. So it's very important because unfortunately, all the performance agendas are mind driven.
yeah,
Nothing is heart driven. That is why we created this program called Lighting the Fire Within. The whole purpose was we wanted to make people feel for their performance before they get to perform. And it did wonders. I remember when we started that initiative in Saudi. I remember in the early years when I launched that agenda and we went to Saudi. I remember many of my Saudi colleagues said, Ash, you have gone crazy. Saudi will never ever accept this. Saudi is very traditional. Saudi doesn't believe in these kind of things. And you'll be
I
surprised, Mark.
Ashutosh,
Saudi, exactly.
I suspect you hear you're crazy quite a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 for sure. And not only that, every time I went to any regions in Saudi market, I met with a lot of resistance. But you know what was surprising? The resistance came from management.
Yes. Yes.
Employees were lapping it up.
Yes. Yep.
And
Yep.
I was amazed in 6 to 7 months' time once I launched the program. Saudi became top notch country in terms of performance in apparel retail. I remember we were fast moving our store chain, and we were opening a lot of new stores, a lot of new employees were coming in continuously. And the moment this agenda went on floor, it actually lapped them up. Everyone became inspired, motivated. And I remember we were less than a few hundred stores, and we very
Yes.
fast scaled up beyond 200 stores in Saudi Arabia. And lighting the fire within, I very strongly believe, became a very strong wheel of excellence and performance for the Saudi performance to go notches up. And because of that, employees became a part of the Saudi story. They became a part of the Saudi mission. They became a part of the Saudi vision. It got aligned with Saudi Vision 2030. And they said, we're going to take BMA and Red Tag and 24 and Savers and every business that is existing in Saudi to the next level of operations. And no wonder we kept performing year on year. At times, I remember we were the best performing value retailer in Saudi.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
were few
Yeah.
months and couple of times we even had beaten landmark brands in the
Wow.
region, only
Wow.
because of the reason that this motivational strategy worked wonders for people to deliver exceptional performances in Saudi. So
Yes.
I'm very proud of that initiative. But you know what was different in that? One of the biggest difference was I killed the bureaucracy in between. If you remember, I made all of you coaches on our panels.
Yes. Yeah.
So a person who's a stacker, or somebody who's let's say a cleaner in the store or somebody like that, everyone had a right to choose a leader that he or she wants to meet with. So I killed the distance between the levels of the organization, and I brought the organization flatter together. I had a session with the MD. You remember, in conversation with A. A stood for Arif Sheikh, who was our MD and one of the founders of BMA. And I brought people closer to him who had watched him make this business big, but never ever met him. For
Yep.
20
Yep.
years they worked, 30 years they worked there. And they suddenly met him. And I can tell you, there were at least hundreds of cases where people walked up to me, they had tears of joy in their eyes. So anyone who tells me, and this is not very old, this is like 4 5 years back. So
Yes.
anyone who tells me that employee experience, employee engagement and all that is very good in books, it doesn't contribute to results, it doesn't contribute to performance, doesn't know what he's talking.
Yeah.
Because
Yes. Absolutely.
we
Yep.
used it to deliver exceptional performance.
Yeah.
And Geo was
Exactly.
a classic example again, because I remember the Geo anthem. It did wonders in Ibn Battuta in our sales. We saw the numbers going up. So
Yep.
everywhere, wherever employee experience was becoming a part of the strategy, the delivery happened. The moment you keep strategy away from employee experience, because then in your mind, you're thinking this is a cost.
Yeah. Exactly.
But when you make it a subset of your strategy and you say, if I don't invest in employee experience, my strategy won't get achieved.
100%. And
Then the
this is
results
part of
follow.
the problem is
Yeah.
that you quite often see, every year we build the 5 year, 3 year, 10 year strategy. It's rebuilt every year. And then what happens is it gets signed off and then it goes in a desk and then we forget
Yeah.
about it completely until the next year, 3 months before we have to start presenting it. But I mean, it's interesting what you said earlier because when I joined Circle K, one of the concerns I had was we
Mm,
had a lot of remote stores and we also had stores in the UAE at the same time. And I was based in Jeddah. So therefore, my concern was, how do I make sure that my message from a strategic perspective, or
mm,
even just a skills-based or training or just vision perspective, how do I get that message to everybody in the team? Now,
sure.
we already had an L&D WhatsApp
Mm,
group where everybody was aligned on there and we would,
mm,
send
mm,
some bits and pieces.
mm,
But what
mm.
I ended up creating was the Monday morning Kcast. So a
Oh.
Circle K podcast that
Mm-hmm.
went out every Monday morning,
Mm-hmm.
and it alternated between things like, okay, here's a message, here's a bit about
Mm,
strategy, here's a bit
mm,
about training, here's
mm,
a sort of learning element. And they also had early access to the Retail 101 podcasts as well,
mm,
so they could access them. But
mm,
what it meant for me as the CEO was that I could get my message across to every
mm,
single member of the team
mm,
without any dilution, without any interpretation. Because if I
mm,
passed it
mm,
through to the general manager and he then went
mm,
down to the ops manager, he then went down to the area managers, then to the
mm,
store managers, then to the team, I've
mm,
got 5 or 6 as a minimum interpretations of what I'm
mm,
trying to say. Whereas
mm,
this gave me an opportunity to talk directly to
mm,
everybody. And it's
mm.
such a simple thing to do,
Yeah, yeah,
and it was only a 5 minute podcast on a
yeah,
Monday,
yeah, yeah.
that it meant my message was getting very quickly to everybody that I needed to get it to without any dilution. Um,
Absolutely,
and with
absolutely.
the tools you have nowadays to make
Yeah,
things like podcasts, and it was an in-house, internally done.
yeah,
There was no money spent at all.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
essentially free. It just took half
yeah.
an hour of my time every Sunday afternoon. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And Mark, if you allow me, I want to add something to that. It's very unfortunate that over the years, leaders have become too serious about themselves. And when I say that, it's about they stopped understanding that when we become too conscious of our levels, when we say, oh, I am a CEO, has he taken an appointment? Has he gone to my EA? Has he sought my diary? And almost all CEOs eventually have this challenge when they reach that zone. When time is scarce, they can't meet everyone, but even then they have a choice to be accessible. Being
yeah,
accessible doesn't mean that you'll give your 9 hours to everyone, but being accessible means that when you see a janitor, or when you're seeing a guard, or when you're seeing someone, there is a greeting that you give to that individual, and you become conscious that everyone who's seeing me is also learning from me by my presence. And I call it the visual presence of a leader. Many times you give messages without even speaking to people. And I've seen a few other examples of leaders who remained accessible no matter how busy they were. And that's an important key. And I think over the years, people have learned not to be accessible. And
100%.
that's a very big, unfortunate demise of
I think,
visual leadership. It's a
I
very,
think
very
again,
important factor.
I come from the 1980s style of management where we learned, MWBA, management by, or MBWA, management by
Yeah,
walking around.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
still
yeah,
do
yeah,
that to
yeah,
this day. I visit the
yeah,
stores, walk around the store, I pick up litter,
yeah.
I'll pull out a price ticket that shouldn't be there, and talk to the team when I'm in the stores. And I
Mm.
think a lot of management now isn't about that. And especially as you get up to the CEO level,
Yeah,
all of a sudden
yeah.
you have board responsibilities
Mm,
and quarterly reporting
mm,
responsibilities. And
mm.
you sort of remove yourself so far away from not only
Yes,
employees, but
yes,
customers as well. And that
absolutely.
also becomes a problem. And then you have your trusted lieutenants around you.
Yes,
And of course, what
yes,
you're doing is you're operating in a bubble of
yes,
your own making of people that are going to tell you 99.9% of
absolutely.
the time what you want to hear. But actually,
Yeah,
you need to hear from the guard, the janitor, the driver,
yes,
the barista, the
yeah,
store manager.
yeah,
You want to hear from a wider ranging perspective of views
yes,
and
yes,
from customers. As
yes.
if you remember when we started Urban Foods,
Mm, mm.
I put myself on every community Facebook page where we had a
Yes,
store. So
yes,
not only was
yes,
I accessible
yes.
to my employees, but I was also accessible to my customers
Yeah,
directly where we had a
yeah,
store. And I
yeah,
think that played a huge part in the growth that
yeah,
we had in those stores because
yeah,
everybody knew that,
yeah,
that
yeah,
even the
yeah,
CEO was accessible.
yeah, yeah. It makes a huge difference, because the moment the lowest or the middle starts feeling that the top is a part of my own setup, that level of inspiration is next level. It's a huge,
Exactly.
huge driver.
Exactly.
Yeah,
We're all there together. And in fact,
yeah,
we had this discussion a few times about the head office, and I don't like the term head office. And in fact,
yeah.
I changed it to central support office because we're
Mm,
not the head
mm,
office because it automatically suggests that we're above
yeah.
something,
We're
and
above
we're
something.
not.
Yes. Yeah,
We are
yeah,
there to support the stores because
yeah,
the stores are where we serve customers, and the
yeah,
customers are the ones that give us money, and we need
yeah,
money. Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
okay. So just again, I suppose to sort of not quite close it up, but to sort of give people some insight into what we are now looking for in
Mm,
terms of attitudes, competencies, and skills when we recruit people into retail.
mm,
There will be people listening to this, hopefully, that
mm,
are looking at a career in retail.
mm,
So what do we look for
mm,
in potential
mm.
recruits?
Perfect. So let me try to answer it in two buckets. And And the first bucket is basically been a journey of mine. It's been a discovery of sorts. I think I kind of referred it back to you sometime back when we were having some passionate conversations. And I've always believed that overall across the world, we are all hiring for three circles. And these three circles are basically your professional and personal experience in industries and sectors you worked in. The second circle is your education experience and wherever all your academic qualifications. And the third set is basically overall personality, etc. The how do you look, etc. All that part. Unfortunately, if you ask me today, this has been the practice for hundreds of years. And I always tell people that you end up spending 20 minutes to 60 minutes to evaluate somebody's 20 to 30 years experience. It is nothing but a joke. It is impossible. Nobody on earth can understand a human mind or a psyche or a psychology, and all three are different things, until unless there is science involved in it. And that's one of the reasons I went very aggressively in last 10, 15 odd years, aggressively behind understanding how the human mind is wired, how the neuro-linguistic programming or how the three compartments of the mind, unconscious, subconscious, and conscious mind operates. And that's one of the reasons I chose certain faculties of assessments, certain faculties of personality psychology, certain faculties of psychometric assessments to learn and embrace and bring it together while I was building Succession IQ in my mind, and eventually I ended up building in reality. So one of the things I realized, Mark, and this has been a very profound learning experience and discovery for myself. If you really look at any individual, and and Freud, the father of human psychology, said it beautifully, that we are all like an iceberg.
Mm.
The 10% of the iceberg is always visible to the naked eye, and the 10% is the how and what. The how is whatever behaviors we are behaving with, and the what is the results and actions we are delivering in front of them. But nobody really goes to the 90% of the iceberg, which is
Yep.
the why.
Yep.
Why is the individual the way the individual is?
Yep.
And that comes from personality psychology, which has your interests. It starts from your childhood, what you picked from your parents, right? What you picked from your first boss, what you learned from your first organization. What are the wrongs and the rights you picked from your parents? What are the biases, prejudices, values you inherited from your religion, from your faith, from your race, from your class, from society, from your teachers? And it all is a composite of your why. And that's
Yep.
why
Yep.
most of the training interventions fail, because we're always dealing with the how and the what, which is the 10% of the iceberg.
Yes.
And that's why the impact of training someone is always symptomatic. Until unless you deal with the why, which is the 90% of the iceberg, only then when you deal with this 90%, which is below the surface, the how and what on top of the surface will change. So
Yes.
you have to deal with that why. And so I brought this method of evaluation, which is used in development centers, assessment centers, to the hiring process. And that's what Succession IQ does very successfully. So we are right now partnering with various companies who are interested in using this science to evaluate the candidates that they hire at top and senior and board level.
Mm.
And one of the things that they've discovered, that it may not be as faster as the other executive search firm hiring, but they end up hiring qualitatively at least 100 times better than what they were hiring from executive search firms. And the reason is there's a qualified assessment that goes in place, and that tells them that this individual will be a miracle for you or this individual can be a disaster for you. It does not matter whether the individual was a success or failure before, which is another yardstick we use, and
Yes.
that's why
Yep.
most companies follow, okay, he was very successful in this organization, so he'll be successful in mine. It is like saying that Nokia CEO leaves the organization and you replace Nokia with Motorola CEO. It will be a disaster because both
Yeah.
organizations culturally are different. The Motorola culture is very different from Nokia culture. You cannot cut, copy, and paste culture of one company to another, even if you're in the same sector. And classically, if you look in Middle East itself, and I won't take the name of the organization, one of the biggest mall making organization, I think everyone can follow. When they lost their CEO, government had to step in to
Yes.
form a panel of people, and even their own family office members were not allowed to be the successor because there was nobody who could lead that organization. So they had to bring in government, and the government had to appoint experts from outside to help the organization in finding a successor. And that's a classical problem. And that's why hiring today is a very big issue for most of these organizations, because in reality, hiring has become body shopping.
Yes, yes.
That you are in FMCG retail, you're hiring another store manager from another store just because he is an FMCG retail. But the same concept you follow at board level also, you follow it at CEO level also. And that's the problem, you know.
That is a
It
problem. I
doesn't
mean,
work.
it's to me, it's. I mean, the retail industry, as we know in the Middle East, is very incestuous anyway. People do tend to sort of move around them for an extra
Yes,
50 dirhams or 50 reals,
yes,
whatever it may be.
yeah,
And I think from a recruitment perspective, I used to be in a business, and I won't say where it was or who it was,
mm,
but it was in the region
mm,
where we had a very high turnover of employees.
mm,
And when we were recruiting, it was
mm.
almost like speed dating in terms of speed recruiting. You'd somebody in
Mm,
front of you, and you'd say, okay, he's
yeah,
got two eyes and he can sign, and he's got four fingers and two thumbs, eight
mm,
fingers and two thumbs. So okay,
mm,
you're hired, and the guy would then only stay for a couple of months, or during his
mm,
probation period,
mm.
the store
Yeah,
manager would find
yeah,
that this guy is basically
yeah,
useless.
yeah.
And I think what we ended up doing is going to I mean, I say this to my wife a lot, the
Mm,
LCD, the lowest common denominator,
mm,
to get somebody in, because we need
mm,
a mostly warm body sitting in a
mm,
seat somewhere, or standing at the shelf somewhere. And
mm,
I think, the way I've always looked at it is I'm not so interested in
mm,
the skills they've picked up before or their background or experience. What I
mm,
look for in the first space is attitude. Do you have an attitude that serves
mm,
customers, that is in and about
mm,
serving customers? Because
mm,
if you don't have the customer service attitude, I
mm.
can't train that. I can't train attitude. What I can
Absolutely.
train is how to make an amazing cup of coffee, how to fill a
Yes,
shelf, how to put price to. I can
yes,
train all the skills. I
yeah,
can even train competencies,
yeah,
but I can't train attitude. So my first look is
yeah,
always, are you able to serve a customer? If I can still serve a customer at my level, and I'm not saying I should or I shouldn't, but I can still serve customers.
sure,
I haven't done
sure,
it in a long time because I'm not very
sure,
good at it, but
sure,
I can serve customers. Now, if
sure,
you cannot serve a customer, you've got the wrong mindset to start off with. And
sure.
that's what people need to understand is
Absolutely.
serve a customer. And
Yes,
that doesn't mean being a servant, and it
yeah,
doesn't mean being servile either,
yeah,
because there are negative connotations at both
yes,
ends of that. You have to actually sit in the middle and say, I am
mm,
here to serve you as a customer, to provide a
yeah,
service, which is about adding value. Because again, if you ask a lot of people in the industry, what is customer service? Oh, I smile at the customer and say hello. That's not customer
Greet,
service.
smile, and thank.
Exactly. Yeah, that's
But
it. It's
Mark, you said it brilliantly, and I want to say it again, and for our audience, that the problem with hiring processes today also is that we keep hiring for skills, whereas we should hire for attitude,
yeah,
and skills can be trained. But if attitude is wrong, or attitude isn't there, the right attitude isn't there, you cannot train attitude. Attitude is
no,
hard wiring.
yes,
You can only train skills. You can make him unlearn certain other skills and train him on new skills, but attitude cannot be undone. But that's the hard wiring of the individual. And I'm very fond of saying this. One of the reasons some of the leaders, and including you and some of the other people, if you look at your resume also, and if I look at my resume also, one common element between both of us is that we have worked in Asia Pacific, and we have worked in Europe and in Middle East. And versus, if there are leaders, and I'm not taking it away, there are many successful leaders in Middle East. If they've only worked in Middle East, they will be very rich in experience and exposure, sure, but they will miss a certain element of characteristic of somebody who comes from Asia Pacific environment.
yeah,
And why you were so successful in your career as some, wherever you left, I remember, because many a times you would walk out of an organization before me. It has happened twice in our careers. You have left before me and I've left afterwards. Every time you left, people kept remembering you, not only because you were a great leader, it was because you touched them in ways that they could remember you by. And that was because you left them with an impression. And why that happened? Because you made choices to go to countries like Pakistan,
yes,
countries like Thailand. You worked in countries where generally retailers don't go.
Yeah.
And that's my another very critical point. When I hire leaders, I look for this ability to have an adventure, ability to take a risk, ability to challenge your own boundaries,
Yes.
And
Yeah.
like someone always, this beautiful quote, if you can't win in here first, you will not win in the game. It's all about taking that risk. Are you willing to plunge? Take the plunge. And I've always seen leaders, whether it's you or many others who I've worked with, they've taken that plunge to do things which other retailers would look at and say, oh my God, that's crazy. I'm not going to do it. You know, but you
Yeah.
ended up doing it. And that's one of the key factors in building what I call as your leadership legacy, and what people would remember you by, and
Yeah.
that's very, very critical. And there aren't many leaders, unfortunately, today in the market who have worked on building that legacy.
I mean,
And
my
that's
my
the that's the key piece.
I mean, the way I've always seen my role, at whatever level I've had, is basically to leave people with more than I started with. Um, because I have a certain amount of knowledge. And again, I know as an expat that there are sort of, I am there to be squeezed like a lemon so that all of the juice comes out. And our time in these places are supposed to be limited by contracts or just by we've reached a certain level with the organization. Now, if I can get the organization to the next stage, then basically my job is done. After that, I maybe need to leave it to somebody else, be it a local
Sure,
that I've been grooming and training to take that role on, or somebody else who has a slightly different skill set.
sure.
But my role is to at least leave the organization better than it was when I arrived, and the
Yes,
people with more than they had before I arrived.
absolutely.
And that becomes quite important.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, that's great. That's really good. Thanks for answering the question so openly and frankly. As you know from my Retail 101 online series, I like to try and break things down into simple things
Sure.
for everybody. And I keep talking about three things, the three simple things. So, what would these three things be in relation to a human capital department and what
Hmm.
they need to do in a retail environment? So, what are the three basics for HR in a retail environment?
Sure. Uh, I'll say for me personally, the three things that I would like to look at. One is I think a human capital function should be having a very strong character. And when I say character, it's something like the way we behave as a team, and it should be in consistency with when no one is around and with when everyone is around. The problem why HR often in retail environment gets a bad name is because we become too close to the management or too close to the employees. It's about neutrality. It's about
Mm.
being unbiased, but also being open to both sides. A very important element of that is having a very strong character, which means right is right, even if everyone else is opposing it, and wrong is wrong, even if everyone else is asking for it. So I think I have tried to at least inculcate these attributes, and that number one attribute is having a character, very strong character of being trusted. So trust is
Mm.
important for a
Mm.
human capital function, very, very critical flavor, which many retailers are not able to today build. And that's one of the reasons why people keep leaving those retailers. The second thing I would say, accessibility. Often what happens is I've always encouraged my team, even during difficult times when you don't have the answers, still listen to people's concerns. And my team many a times would come up to me and say, Ash, we don't know what to do after that. And I said, okay, let's understand that you're not talking to him. His manager is not talking to him. His manager's manager is not talking to him.
Mm.
He's dying inside every day. Let him at least know there is no clarity, but I understand what you are feeling. The problem is that we are scared of dealing with bad news.
Yeah.
That's the reason we
Yeah.
avoid this attribute of listening too much. And I always tell people HR has to be the listening post of people. People should be fearless to say anything. Even if they have an issue with the CEO, the
Yep.
first person they should
Yep.
walk up to is the HR. Unfortunately, not many CHROs try to build that kind of spirit in their team. And I've always encouraged that spirit, that be open to listen to anything. So that's the second thing. The third thing, and that's usually very different from the way HR is considered to be, I've always trained my teams to take risks. Generally, HR is opposite to that, and you've known me, and I've often
Yeah.
been called crazy, like you've been called also. I've always taken risks. Generally, HR
Mm.
is averse to risks. My belief is that HR is a function which is not only just administrative, it is culture building and it is strategic. The moment we take a risk, we become more closer to business because we are able to move faster with the business, because business will always try to explore certain areas where we may not have an awareness of, and we should be willing to take that risk. We should be willing to read about it, learn about it, embrace it, change accordingly, and take the risk. So I'm very fond of taking risk, and I have always encouraged my teams to take risks. So the 3 points for me is build trust. Second is be accessible by listening to everything. And third is be open to take risks. These are the three very important characteristics for me.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Ash. That really gives us a good insight into how you certainly manage HR, and it's always been appreciated from my side when we've worked together, but also
Thank you.
gives some big indicators to all of the HR people out there
Sure.
um,
Sure.
as to how you should be doing things, and what means something to not only the CEO but also the employees on the floor,
Sure.
because they need to feel as though there is somebody there for them, and that can be
Correct.
HR. And at the same time, HR has a very difficult balance because on the one hand it's got the employees, and on the other hand it's got the business. So it has
Absolutely.
to somehow balance both of those things in their hands, and they're not the good guys or the bad guys.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
it's just a balancing act in terms
Yes.
of what's best for which part of the business at the time. That's
True.
brilliant. Okay, thank you very much, Ash. That's been excellent. We shall probably be back next month with another Retail Voices episode. So keep
Lovely.
checking the website for retail101online.com for more details as to exactly when and who we will have coming on the show. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell wherever you get
I
your
will.
podcast fix from, so that you don't miss a single episode. Welcome to the Retail Education Revolution. Okay.
Excellent, Mark.
Thanks,
Lovely
Ash. That
pleasure
was
talking to
brilliant.
you. Thank you.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Thanks, Ash.